I love amps. Ask me how much I love amps. You guys already know. I love amps so much, almost more than I love guitar. Amps are so cool. They're just loud and unruly, and they look cool, and they smell good when you turn them on. They got tubes in them, and I just love them. That's obvious. So, in that spirit, what I wanted to do is make a series of videos called Amps in the Zone. Basically, what I want to do is take simple vintage style amplifiers. Doesn't have to be vintage, but vintage style, by that I mean simple. Not like no effects loops, master volumes, none of that stuff. Just really simple amps, and I dial them up, dial up the tone controls, dial up the volume controls, and show you a couple of my favorite settings. One thing that I've noticed about myself is generally with these simple amplifiers, I gravitate generally towards one or two different ways to set them up, and I don't really deviate. It's like there's something about them, you find that magic zone where you dial it in and it's like, there's my sound, and then you don't really need to get away from it. You can get all the different tonal variations and color that you want out of just varying your pick attack, maybe playing with your fingers instead of a pick, varying the volume and tone controls on the guitar, and then of course you got the whole world of pedals and effects you can add. We're not going to get into that in this video. This is all just about pure amp tone, so I'm not going to use any overdrives or boosts or anything like that. This is all about just dialing up some great sounds on vintage style simple amplifiers and kind of settling in on a tone, and then once I settle in on that tone, I'm going to play some classic songs and riffs that you guys will be familiar with. Now, I'm not going for the exact sounds that were on the records or anything like that. I just want to dial the amp up to sound as good as I possibly can, and then just play what comes to mind, whatever I get inspired to play with those sounds, much as you would do at a cover gig or anything like that. You're not always going for the exact tone off the record. It's just like you make your amp sound great, and then you play the songs you got to play at your gig. So that's what I'm going for in these videos. So we're going to start off with the classic 4-hole super lead style Marshall. I got a few great examples of these amps here. Let's check out the amps we're going to listen to. 1972 JMP lead spec 50-watt Marshall. Super stoked I've got this amplifier. I've always wanted one of these, and now I have one. It's a really, really good example of an amplifier of this era. It's got very, very straight circuit board, mustard caps, all that good stuff. It's only had routine maintenance done. Just a terrific sounding amp. Quite aggressive. More on that in a second. Back here, another amp we're going to look at. 1969 100-watt lead spec amp. This is Dave Friedman's amp. He got it recently. He thought it sounded great, and so he wanted a nice example of an old 100-watt, so here it is. It's had some mods done and stuff, but he's got it all back to stock and sounds just terrific. Now, both of these amplifiers have bright caps on the volume 1 channel. Suhr SL68, late 60s, 1968 to be exact, plexi-style amplifier. This was hand-wired for me, made by John Suhr in 2011. I actually said, I want to get an old Marshall, I really want an old plexi, and John said, I'll build you one. And basically he made me this amp. It's his version of the ultimate late 60s Marshall style circuit. Obviously those amps had different components at times and went through some changes and stuff like that. This is what he thinks is the best sounding version of that amp, and I have to say it sounds really amazing, and you're going to hear in a second here that it totally hangs with the old Marshalls. So I used a blasting, super loud, mic'd up cabinet for most of the sounds in this video. I did use the Suhr reactive load in IRs just a little bit, and I'll let you know in the video when I'm doing that. I just did it for contrast and just to try something else. But yeah, this is the cab I'm using for most of the video. It's a Friedman straight cabinet, 1960B style cabinet. It has V30 speakers in the bottom, but greenbacks in the top, and I'm miking a greenback, so that's the only thing that you're hearing really is the greenback. Miking off from the center of the speaker a little bit with an SM57, and off from the center on the other side with a Sterling Audio ST159, which is a new active ribbon mic I got, and just blending those two mics together. Mainly the 57 with the ribbon mix, maybe 5 or 6 dB lower. Okay, so let's talk about the SL68 for a second when it's not on 10. This particular amp has old Tesla EL34s in it, and when I got them, I put them in and I blew a fuse right away when it was on high power and it played kind of loud. So ever since then, I've been leaving it on the low power 90 volt mode. But they do sound great at 90. The tone that I've got dialed up right now is great for Zeppelin. It's great for AC/DC. Great for, you know, all kinds of other sort of classic rock stuff. Let me see here. I've got the volume right now on about 6 or 6.5. And it's kind of a magic sweet spot on this amp. I just find it sounds really, really, really killer with the volume set at about 6 or 6.5. When I get a little lower, it's cool too, but it just loses some of the magic. It's cool, it's just not as ballsy, and I just really like it. It just hits this magic sweet spot around kind of 6 or something. It's like the tone fills out or something, and it just gets more muscular and sounds really cool. Okay, now the treble I've got set on about just a little bit past half. Okay, if I bring it all the way up, all the way down, it's like, you know, it doesn't make heaps and bounds of difference, but I find I always gravitate for this particular tone to having it at about 5 or 5.5 on the dial, just a little past noon. Mids on Marshall style amps, I like cranked. If you turn them down, this is with the mids on, say, 4. It just feels like I'm hollowing out a cool part of the tone. So I've always got the mids on 10. This makes the amp have teeth and sound really cool. The bass, you can get away with running it higher than I am right now, which is on just past, it's about 11 o'clock or noon. But it just keeps it a little tighter to not have it up. I'll turn it up a little bit. Sounds cool for this sound. Now, presence on a Marshall, it's important to note. I was talking to Dave Friedman about this the other day, and he was saying, you know, it's like you lose gain when you turn it down. You actually do lose gain when you bring down the presence on an old Marshall style amp. So this is with it off. Now I'm going to hit a chord, an A chord again, because it's my favorite chord. I'm going to hit an A chord and listen as I turn up the presence and how it actually, yeah, sure, it gets brighter in that super highs, but also, like, there's more gain. It's sort of lossy, you know, when you turn down that presence. So you can get that presence up a little bit, and then if you want to warm up the sound, you just roll down the treble a little bit. So I think this is a great setting for this amp.
So this amp doesn't have a bright cap on the volume pot, and that makes it real usable across the whole range of the volume pot. And especially with single coils, it just seems to work really well without the bright cap. So if I turn the amp all the way down and off, and then just bring it up to where I've got it right now, which is about like 6 on the dial. Now I've got the channel 2 or normal channel volume up a little bit too, and you know, that channel, even if you don't have the amp jumpered, it affects the tone. So I'll show you that. I'm just going to turn it off for a second, then I'm going to bring up the channel that's supposedly not working, and you're going to hear it. So now it's off. Now I'll roll it up. So it still definitely works, even though that you've got nothing plugged into the, you know, the normal channel input. So if you got a 4-hole Marshall and you never run those extra volumes up, even when you're just using the treble channel or extra volume up, try turning it up a little bit because it sounds really cool. This amp has a really aggressive bright cap right now, and this is the way it came to me and the way I think it came stock. It makes the amp really, really aggressive kind of right out of the gate. There's kind of no clean sound in it. Sounds pretty awesome, I think. But it's, you know, it's aggressive, and it's more compressed than, say, the SL68 or 100 watt amp. 50 watts, it makes sense. But it's got kind of more sag to it, and it's definitely more vintage sounding in some ways. I don't mean that in like it necessarily sounds better. I just mean it sounds like it's got years on it. So in this amp, right now, because of the aggressive bright cap, I'm jumpering the treble channel to the channel 2, and I'm mixing it in a little bit. So let me just turn off the bright channel for a second. Here's the normal channel. Real fuzzy and warm on its own, right? Kind of useless on its own, really, to me. But when I bring in the bright channel, you're going to hear right away why the normal channel is cool. Okay, so that's with the bright channel down real low. And so you're getting a ton of... The lower that the volume is, right now it's on like 2 on the brighter channel. The lower that the volume is, the more aggressive that bright cap is going to be. As that volume gets louder and louder and louder, the main, you know, channel 1 volume gets louder and louder. The bright cap's getting mixed out of the equation, and so consequently, this amp's best tones on channel 1, as it in its current form, seem to be with the bright volume anywhere up above 4 or 5. But it's nice to mix in that normal channel a little bit, just to kind of mitigate the bright cap, I find. Okay, now it's on 8 on the bright channel. I'm gonna back it down a little bit. I'll bring it down to like 6, and so let me pull out the normal channel now, so that you can hear what it sounds like when none of that is mixed in. I had it on about 4. I'm just gonna turn it off. I'll pull it up to about 3 or 4 now. Just does a nice thing when it's mixed in just a little bit, I find. I like it. So I'm going to leave it in a little bit. Now I've got the mids cranked once again, and that's sounding good to me. I've got the treble back down to like 4, once again to kind of mitigate the bright cap a little bit. If I bring the treble up, this kind of sounds cool to me. Maybe helps a little bit to tame some of the top end. Bass I got on like 4, and once again with the presence, I don't want to lose too much of it, but I'll roll it from 0 all the way up. You really hear on this amp how the presence is really a part of the sound, the gainy sound of the amp. You know, when you lose too much of the presence, it's like you lose the, it warms it up or whatever, but you lose the character. It's supposed to do that wild stuff to me anyway, you know. It's really cool if you just, you know, turn the presence all the way up and then back it down to sort of as little as possible. You know, I like to leave it up as high as I can without it being just too much. I play a little bit of that same tune that I played with the SL68. It's a cool sound. It might be a little fuzzy, you know, for that, I think, you know, that particular riff. So I think what I'm going to do is on a push-pull pot, I'm going to put the bright cap switchable, so that I can get, because it is cool when you're running the amp up high on like 6, 7, 8, it's cool to have that aggressive, but I'd like to be able to kind of like tame the amp a little bit, somewhat, so I can get some more of those kind of like slightly lower gain AC/DC kind of things and stuff like that. To make them work, if you got that aggressive bright cap, you got to jumper them. So you go from the low input of channel 1 into the high input of channel 2 with a little patch cable, and now I can blend in the bass channel, or channel 2, I call the bass channel, or normal channel. So that channel by itself sounds usually quite dark and woolly, but you can kind of EQ the amp much better now by jumpering those channels. So now I'm going to bring the bright channel up a little bit, channel 1. I'll turn down the presence and the treble a little bit.
This amp just kind of wants to rock all the time. It reminds me of the 72 as well. Okay, I think I found my favorite sound on this 69 Marshall. So I got both the volumes on about 5. I got the channels jumpered. This is one aggressive amp. It's got a lot of top end, it's got a lot of gain, and I'm running the treble and presence back a little bit further than I might have on even on the 50 watt, and certainly less than on the SL68, which doesn't have bright cap on the volume control. But anyway, this is the song I thought of when I heard this tone and dialed it in. It's a pretty great sound, I think. So technically it's not the closest amp in the room for this tone right now, but it sounds really good. I got the 50 watt plugged in. Pretty much everything's on 10 except the presence and the treble are both back down to 8. It just tames it a hair and it's still plenty wild. And here's the tone. Okay, I'm plugged into the SL68 now, and everything's on 10, and man, it just sounds badass right now. Okay, now just for a comparison, I unplugged the speaker cabinet out in the room and I plugged in my Suhr reactive load, and now I'm going into an impulse response. Actually, it's a couple impulses mixed of a bright SM57 on a greenback and a dark SM57 on a greenback. So one's more center and one's more off to the edge. So what did I learn while I was making this video? Well, I learned that my good old SL68 here totally kicks ass. It sounds great, and I think it was maybe my favorite amplifier in this shootout. So vintage isn't always best. Although the vintage amps sound great as well, totally cool, and they've got their own thing going on. When I was getting the 50 watt, John Suhr said to me, "What are you doing that for? Like, what do you need that for?" And it kind of like, "You dumbass, I already made you one, and it sounds great." And he was right, as he usually is. But anyway, I still love this 50 watt. I think it's terrific. I'm just going to do a little bit of work to it. Number one, it's got brand new preamp tubes in it, Chinese preamp tubes and JJ EL34s, whereas the SL68 has old Tesla EL34s, and it's got, I think, Amperex and Mullards in the preamp. So that could be a significant difference right there. And in addition to that, the aggressive bright cap that is on volume 1 on the 50 watt amp is really limiting, I think, the range of tones that I can get out of it at anywhere below maybe 6 on the channel 1 volume control. So I think I'm going to do a mod where I put a push-pull pot on volume 1, and when you pull it out, it engages the bright cap, but when you push it in, there's no bright cap. I'm learning that maybe on these old Marshall amplifiers, you know, 8 times out of 10, I'm feeling like I don't really need that bright cap on volume 1 for most of my guitars. It just, like the SL68 sounds great all the way across the range of the volume control on channel 1, and I can get cleaner sounds out of it, and I don't know, it just works better for me, I think, not having the bright cap many times. So, that's it. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed Amps in the Zone, the first edition with the 4-hole Marshalls, and lots more to come. I was thinking I can do the AC15 back there. It's a really simple amplifier. Also can do my Bassman. I've got this, oh god, it's heavy, a Comet head right here, which is a really, really awesome sounding amplifier. So lots of amps I can do. If you guys got any suggestions, hit me up and let me know if you want to hear a certain type of amplifier. Cranked up, dialed in, into the zone, and hey, I'll see you real soon. I'm Pete Thorn. Over and out.